Hey everybody, today I am going to be reviewing The Eternal Daughter. This was directed by Joanna Hogg. Hogg is a British filmmaker, and this movie is somewhat connected to her Souvenir series, though it's not necessarily a part of it as in like a trilogy in the literal sense. But this is a very unique type of film, and it is somewhat inaccessible, and yet when I watched it after it was over, a lot of the ideas and everything just really hung in the air for me. It has a feeling of sitting in a very old, empty room that is so full of anecdotes that are unspoken, whispers of the past, and somehow you feel lost among them even though you are in the present day. You can even feel stifled by it. This is essentially a ghost story, but it is not a typical ghost story. It's not dependent on a lot of those typical horror tropes and a lot of those narrative gimmicks that you might be used to in the past. It is more in line with like Victorian era Gothic stories, and I think of something like Turn of the Screw or A Rose for Emily, where when you first read the story, maybe some of the ambiguity might feel almost a little bit too inaccessible to you initially. I think once you start to sift through a lot of the elements of the movie after the fact, that's when you realize that maybe there is more to unpack than you might have initially perceived. And in this movie, you have Tilda Swinton, and she is playing two roles here. She is playing Julia, who is a filmmaker, and she is also playing Julia's aging mother, Rosalind, and they are going back to visit this very Gothic old estate that it seems to have been converted into like a hotel. And it's a place that holds a lot of memories for Rosalind because she was kept there when she was a child during the war. And so often when you go back and revisit, nostalgic childhood places like that, the innocence of that, the innocence of those memories can be, somewhat comforting to an extent. But those memories naturally also hold a lot of pain in them as well. And I think it's often the way that we recall pain or the way that we perceive it, often through, the tales of other people, I think is where the complexity lies in the movie. But the fact that Julia is a filmmaker in the movie says a lot about the character, and it says a lot about what the movie is trying to say, I think. She is trying to maybe make sense of her life, make sense of her mother's life, and maybe their relationship together through her mother's stories. She's wanting to make a film about her mother's experience. And it's interesting because Julia seems to be very protective of her mother and very protective of all of those memories that she carries with her. But there's something very strange about it as well, because she's very, very sensitive about all of these memories. And it's like she's very afraid that her mother is going to recall painful memories, and she doesn't want her to go there in her mind, it seems. And it also seems like she's riddled with a lot of guilt, though we don't quite understand why. There's a very strange, dreamlike type of mist surrounding the entire movie where everything is just blurry enough conceptually, and yet these figures are kind of emerging from the darkness, and you kind of have to interpret them. And Swinton playing both the roles here, obviously there's a very meta angle there, and that really changes the way you perceive the entire movie, how it's written and all of that. But it's not just the fact that she's playing two roles, it's more how she plays them that I think is really, really brilliant, because first of all, she's not working with a traditional script here. It's more of an outline. So a lot of what she's saying, like she'll have a scene with herself, she's playing both Julia and Rosalind, and most of it is improvised. And I think what's remarkable is how subtle Swinton's performance can be, because she's definitely, she looks very different as the mother because she's in, makeup and prosthetics and all of that. And yet she's not that different from Julia in terms of the way that she's performing the character. There's such a fine line here, and you almost can't see it, but it's definitely there. It's ever so distinct. And I think that is really hard to do. I think you have to have a really, really great actor to be able to pull a lot of those nuances off, and certainly Tilda Swinton is that. She picks up on a lot of the nuances I think a lot of actors would neglect. Is Rosalind more a collection of memories to Julia, or was there never a Rosalind to begin with? Maybe she's facing herself and the fact that she doesn't have children of her own, or maybe she's facing the idea of age and time through those conversations that she recalls with Rosalind. And the more I weigh certain possibilities when it comes to Julia's motivations, the more the movie does grow in my mind. And I just love the way that certain parts of the movie are shot, because the mother and the daughter are almost never in the same frame a lot of the time. And there's something to just that spatial awareness, just the actor in relation to each other, in relation to the camera and all of that. It creates a very strange lack of grounding in the movie, and it really works. I found myself initially maybe struggling a little bit with the look of the movie. I was hoping for maybe a little bit more texture within the framing, but there is also something about kind of the softness of the framing that creates something a little bit slippery. That feeling, like I mentioned, of being lost among all of these memories or unable to grip onto anything, and that's a very lonely feeling, and it can feel a little bit nightmarish. The sound design is absolutely fantastic in this movie. It's capturing, of course, all of those typical things like the creaks and like the doors opening slowly and like the wind kind of whirling outside. And a lot of the sounds on the outside feel a lot maybe louder than the actual dialogue. I find myself kind of straining to be able to hear Rosalind and Julia when they're talking to each other. And just these weird whispers of these abstract ideas that are so hard to hold on to. It has a feeling of trying to chase a shadow, or like, like a weird mirage in your peripherals that you can't quite discern what it is. It feels like we're given much less of a foundation compared to even, stories like Turn of the Screw, and I found that to be kind of an interesting choice. And again, part of that does feel absolutely right. A lot of the clues that we are given in the movie feel just as elusive as real memories do to us. And I think about all the curiosities that we might have about our family background, family stories that maybe we can no longer ask about because those family members and their stories are gone. So all those stories go into the graves with them. But at the same time, I also wonder to myself if maybe the movie is too abstract, a little bit too ambiguous, and it's never really grounding us fully in anything that is concrete. And ultimately, because of that, maybe it's not as meaningful as it could be or as emotionally resonant as it could be. I wanted the movie to be maybe a little bit longer than it actually is. Or at least just give us a chance to settle into these characters a little bit more, settle into their conversations, settle into the symbols. It is hard not to make a ton of comparisons to The Shining with this movie, especially when you have characters like Bill, side character in the movie, is certainly reminiscent of like Dick Halloran. And devices like that are certainly guiding you in a certain direction. And yet here, I feel like Bill, just as a symbol in this particular movie, just isn't pronounced enough maybe for my taste. He's certainly an intriguing character. I kind of wanted him probed a little bit more because again, he could just be another vision that she has as well. And I think I also wanted the idea of her being a filmmaker to be probed just a little bit more because I think it's easy to think that if you're making a movie about your mother, you're wanting to maybe face a lot of the darker memories or the things that are hard to face about your life. But what's interesting about art, and I think just the meta aspects of this movie, is just how much that art can also remove you from reality at the same time, or how much the distortion of memory can remove you from reality. Art can maybe even blur the lines of communication further. And so I like the idea of showing art not always as therapeutic, and it can also have some drawbacks to it. And yeah, I think I would have wanted to see more of that. There's just so much swarming in the air above my head, I feel like, when I talk about this movie, and I really did enjoy it a lot. I found it to be so intriguing, and certainly it's very up my alley, as a lot of people know. I love kind of more subtextual Gothic pieces like this. And if that's your thing, then I think this is a great movie to watch. Again, it's short, it's sweet, and yeah, interesting. And that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website. As always, it is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are fantastic. Guys, thank you so much for your support. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.